This lecture contains the completed outline, the rough draft, and editing. I'm not going to edit the whole thing with you. I'm going to just show you how to get started and point out a few things there. So we've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get going. This is the title page, and with any theory essay, the question sort of comes, so what? What's the theory of the bee colonizations? What's the theory of this? And so it's true, you're right. There does need to be some sort of connection to the grander scheme of things. And as I was going through this project and filling in the outline and getting to a point where I didn't know anything, and I think one of my tutorials says that, why did I pick this topic? This is impossible. And that's a natural phase for me and everybody I know who has ever written an essay, is there's a point at which it seems like this is never going to end. I don't know anything. What am I doing here? And then an illumination happens. And during that process of illumination, when I thought, oh, I do see the grander picture, because the whole thing about Woodstock has always been it could never, ever happen again. And of course, they tried it just 3 months later in December at Altamont Speedway in California, when the Rolling Stones, who didn't perform at Woodstock, wanted to prove that they could do a free concert too. So they hastily put things together, put the wrong people in charge, and there were 3 deaths, multiple stabbings, storming the stage, fires, gunshots, people being shot. It was a disaster. So after that, it was nothing like Woodstock could ever happen again. And yet, in a way, it sort of did, didn't it? Not in this kind of a venue where we're all going there for peace and music, but for the March for Our Lives. I couldn't believe the number of people that came out of nowhere. I mean, they had such an information network that's fantastic. So I just thought, I just did yesterday. So I finished the rough draft, and this is what I added is the point. This paper is dedicated to the children of the world who must at times follow a drummer to march for our lives. And so that's that. Now, I pointed out to you in a short tutorial before this one about structure. And of course, when I write an essay, I want to create a structure. Otherwise, I'm just throwing in information and hoping that something hits. And that doesn't work. It doesn't work. It makes for frenzy. It makes for content that doesn't make any sense. It makes for just cut and paste without any reason. And it just turns into something that I wouldn't be really proud of, because I want to be proud of what I've accomplished. So I had shown you a very simple strategy. Let me show you that again real quick. This was the one that I showed you on why do people do bad things. And we've got a thesis statement containing a formula of 3 things, how people are seduced into doing evil. And then we're going to relate that to one specific event that happened. And then we're going to, the formula is 1, 2, and 3. This is how those people were seduced into evil. Then I would have my position, which is where I think one of the things that maybe wasn't covered there, or something that I think in addition to that information was, or my personal connection to this paragraph or 2 paragraphs is very important. And then the conclusion. So that's a very easy theory, isn't it? Why did these people do these things? There's no yes or no answer. It's a theory. All right, so the theory for our essay for Woodstock, and I believe it is our essay because you've been with me every step of the way. So let's look at the strategy structure for our essay. Okay, so the strategy for this was twofold. First, there's the factual basis that this festival was unusual. This is not the typical festival that was popular in the 60s and early 70s. And I believe I showed you that graph that I created by hiring somebody for $5 to do the research and do the totals in participation. And then I went to Fiverr.com and got somebody to create the graph. Just to show you that graph again real quickly, just to get our bearings. This graph was created by Omni, who took the totals of people who were trying to get to, arrive at, on the road to, inside the venue, of, around the venue, on the grass, looking in, camping around the town, and so forth, and came up with these numbers. So you can see that by an enormous leap, nobody even comes close to just the outpour that was Woodstock. So we've got to start there. Let's go back to that strategy. So I'm going to explain my theory of how those numbers went from the small number at Newport all the way up to 4 million. And that's estimated because there were some reports I found that said that there were 5 to 6 million cars coming, or people and cars coming down from Canada and coming across the Great Lakes and coming from the middle of America headed this way. And the Californians had all come in through that same route, some up through Canada and some across the country. But so some of those reports said 5 to 6 million. However, I could not find the actual report that said that. So I had to go on two reports from one of the producers and a report from the upstate New York police that rounded out that figure. So coming up with that number took a while. It took a while. Some were easier, but it took a while to get that all figured out. So, and of course, it's all documented in the essay, of course. Now, I used the tipping point because if I look at this graph, let me look at the graph. Right here, something happened. This is cataclysmic. These represent human beings. So do these numbers. And so there has to be an explanation for that. Now I'm calling the spike to this number a grand success. But other people would say, no, it wasn't a success. It was a disaster. It was a muddy disaster. It was ridiculous. It cost the government money. It cost people money. People could have lost their lives. They didn't, but they could have, blah, blah. So now I have to think, okay, well, why was it a success? I mean, you have to admit it's a huge spike. So I decided to go with The Tipping Point, which is a book by Malcolm Gladwell where he discusses the rise of something, of a product or of an event or of a movement that steadily climbs and climbs, and then suddenly it hits this tipping point and it just sails off. And it just, it just takes off into what he calls an epidemic, not in the sickness sense of the word, but in the idea that it just goes off the charts. Okay, so that's why I used the tipping point. Now, let's go back to that strategy. So, we can all agree that something dramatic happened. And Malcolm Gladwell, in his book, The Tipping Point, says that the factors that cause something to climb to that epidemic level are the power of context, the law of the few, the connectors, and the stickiness factor. So he had them in different order, but I put them in the order that I placed them in the essay because the context it makes the same sort of statement that the definition section of an essay makes. What happened? Where did it take place? Why was it happening? What was going on around the town? So I just make that part of the tipping point, one of my major points. And then that only goes so far. The stickiness factor only goes so far. Because 30,000 goes up to 4 million without hostility, without a riot, without stabbings, murders, gunshots, weaponry of any kind. given the statistics of things that went on, the Denver Pop concert that had happened just before, smaller concert, didn't, the police were there in force, and when students tried to crash the gates, which I don't like that part either, and I make that clear in my essay, I'm not proud of the gate crashers who tear down gates to get into an event without just buying a ticket. But nevertheless, it happened. The police were there in Denver. They threw tear gas bombs over the fence into the crowds. The crowds picked the bombs back up and threw them back over the fence at the police. A wind picked up, and all of that tear gas swept over the entire group of people. So that happened right before Woodstock. And yet Woodstock, with everything that you can think of that can possibly go wrong, just keeps adapting and adapting and adapting. So that's what we mean by the tipping point only goes so far. Maybe the tipping point goes to here, but we're going way up to here. So that's where I started thinking, what is my theory? How am I going to explain that huge leap to 4 million people? And so I'm just showing you my process. Your process will be your own. I'm just showing you what I do, and you can take it or leave it or whatever you want to do. I'm thinking, okay, theory, theory, theory. What do I know? What do I know? What do I know? I think, well, I know about karma. So I come and I open up a new document. I title it Theory. And I've got this book to refer back to, but I'm thinking, okay, well, I know about karma. And so I type in karma into Google, and that brings up Dharma and karma. And I went, okay, let's see what that is. I click a little bit more, and I see this concept here. There is no effect without a cause, or cause without effect. I went, ooh, that's the start of a theory. Then I'm looking through, and I'm just looking through to see what that little article says, and they mention the Gnostic Church. I'm thinking, what's that? I don't know about that. So I click on that, and that takes me to this guy named Heller. And Heller, in his short article, it's a beautiful article, very well written, very short, sweet, and to the point. None of those people try to get too lofty, and I really appreciate that about the mystical people because, you know, so many things you read trying to sound important and trying to make up fancy words or use fancy words, blah. So he says in that article, the mystical or esoteric insight. I like that. There's some kind of insight, some kind of like esoteric means only we know about it. It's like a shared thought, a communal shared thought. So I take mystical or esoteric insight. I pop that into Google, and that takes me to mystical intuition, which was in an article that I found in the Principles of Esoteric Spirituality. And so I go, okay, well, I'll learn about that. So now I'm reading about mystical intuition, and I see what that is, and this is from a Greer article, and then, of course, I always put the information in there. So now I'm getting my format of 3 things that have to do with this mystical or esoteric insight to build on. So I talked to my friend who went to the University of Santa Monica and got a degree in spiritual psychology. And I interview her, and I ask her about some of these concepts. And we have left the planet. We are way out of the planet now. We're talking all kinds of, it's fun to do. It's fun to talk about what's happening in the universe. And Brian, the world seems so much bigger. Right now, after doing this essay, I'll tell y'all, the world seems so much bigger. So she starts talking to me about the deeper I. And I go, well, okay, so somehow these people, these 4 million people, 600,000 of whom are all cramped into one little muddy place, somehow they are all tapping into some sort of I inside themselves as an individual that allows them to collectively join in an agreement of peace and well-being. So I come back after I talk to her, and I type in the deeper I into Google, and I find all kinds of cool stuff on that. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, I want to, because there's this whole thing about what I find interesting is, okay, you got people These people, we wake up on Saturday morning. We are hungover. We have taken drugs most likely. And so we're sick. We're hungover and hungry and thirsty and cramped and crowded. And oh my goodness. And they've been out of food now. So it didn't even come close. And somehow this little granola mixture that the security I'll go into later, that had come up with in little Dixie cups, they're sharing that. The townspeople who had been holding up signs and trying to block the whole thing are making sandwiches. 10,000 sandwiches. 10,000 sandwiches sounds like a lot, doesn't it? Until you think you've got to feed 600,000 people. How's that going to happen? Okay, so you got to get up into the spiritual when you start thinking about that. I'm sorry, it's just a natural, logical conclusion. The numbers don't add up. The amount of food available and the number of people to feed simply does not add up. So we get into the spiritual. And when I got into the spiritual, which I typed in, I was taken to the most incredible, lucky, fabulous thing of my life. And that was this fabulous, fabulous book. Every page of this book was a gem. And, fantastic. It was so, oh my gosh, I have found the mother lode of quotes, of research, of sources. It was so much fun. Put a pin in this. I want to show you something important. This is important. I've got this fabulous article where every word, it's 28 pages. I could just pick any spot in the thing, and this Granholm has got wonderful ideas that I can quote. Now, here he is in this article, this 28-page article, and he says, Kaku von Stuttgart regards the esoteric as an element of discourse that consists of claims to real or absolute knowledge and means of making this knowledge available. Von Stuttgart further contends that while the specific means of making esoteric knowledge available by considerable ideas meditated by higher beings or gained through personal experience, right? And then he's got a little footnote. So the question always comes up, what if I've got a quote within a quote? He's quoting himself, quoting this man, Stuttgart. Okay, I have two choices. I can follow this and find the original source and quote from the original source, or I can find something else. Now, many times I have come across situations where that quote from that second person was so important to my essay, I had to use it, but I can't use it from a second source. I have to go to the source and find it. So, in this case, when we have 28 pages worth of information that's all fantastic, why not just use what this man has to say? He's an expert. He's a decorated expert, vetted expert, right? Just want to make sure you see that, just to make that point clear. This is the most wonderful thing I found also. And it didn't take that many clicks to find these fabulous articles. Sometimes you go through some and you go, oh, this is just somebody pontificating. They're trying to sound all smart. I go ahead and add it to my Easy Bib, to my Works Cited, but I don't use it. I just, because I opened it, I have to cite it. And so here's his philosophy. And Edward Ingram Watkin is a vetted philosopher. He is an expert also. So in his article, he has something that's mentioned also from somebody else. Okay. This is something that he's mentioned there. Okay, do I want to spend the next 2 hours trying to find page 60 so that I can create a citation? Because I cannot do a citation within a citation. He could be lying. What if he's not telling me the truth about what somebody else said? What if I was quoted in something and I didn't say that at all? But they have a little footnote that says that someplace where I said it, but that's not what I said at all. So that's why you can't do it. Well, why would I do that when every single page of his book is just fantastic? I could quote any of these. And it's written in very clear language. You can see that this is all the stuff that he is talking about. And if he's referring to somebody and he refers it back to himself, that's one thing. But this is just, you see, I take his own words. I don't have time for that. This is a 402-page book. I haven't got that kind of time. I can get everything I need here. And that's what we want to do in an outline, is just get what I need and get out. So we have the breakdown. This is our thesis in the introduction. Of course, we're going to fill all that out later. This is just the bone structure, like I like to call it. So that's got the tipping point. We've got Western esoteric, the deeper I. I'm doing that. The deeper I. And then the spiritual element, the conclusion, and then the dedication that I created for the book, which is I just decided yesterday, I'm going to include in an afterword. Not a preachy afterword. I hope not. It may look preachy. We'll have to see it when we edit it. Okay, so that's it. Now, what I do is I'm going to fill this in. Otherwise, I'm going to get so lost in all of here. It looks like, well, that's all you need to do. Now just start writing. Well, yeah, no, because the poster, just for example, the information, all they had to market was a poster. That's it. We have a poster. We don't have, internet didn't even, the first two computers didn't even communicate with each other until October of 1969, and that was when one computer at UCLA sent a message to one computer over at USC. So we don't even have computer. Forget about Instagram, no email, no nothing. They have radio stations that they can contact, telephones, and a poster. So that poster becomes important, doesn't it, in explaining this huge spike. And I'll just refer to that as the spike, and you'll know what I'm talking about. I won't go back to that diagram. So now let's go and look at what the outline looks at when it's all fleshed out. Because I have the outline laid out, when I research, or when I think of what I want to write in my own words, I can take that research and pop it into the outline. I have the research also contained on notes pages, different pages of quotes from people and so forth, so I can pop those in where they go, and it makes the research so enjoyable because I never look at something and wonder. You can see that after I got this to this point, I moved this into section 2, which is a note I made myself, and you can see I already moved it there, so I'm just going to take that notation out. I already did it, so, but I had it for a while down in there, so I just had to remember, so I was on a roll. Okay, now the information comes here. This is where I just got an entire interview with somebody, and I put it there just in case I wanted to use it. And as you can see, I used one line of it. But I'd rather have too much. I'd rather overwrite than underwrite all the time. I hate coming up upon time to edit my essay and there's a hole. And that means I've got to stop everything. I've got to go back to the internet, open up EasyBib, find what the hole was, fill it in with information, and so forth. Oh, I'd rather overwrite every time. So, now we have that. Now, remember that the big wow factor is this chart. That's when the point is brought home that this was not just any ordinary concert from the Summers of Love that started in 1967. This is something very different. And so that's where I put it. We talked about it a little bit last time, I think. The placement of that is very important. And you can see, as soon as I use something in the actual rough draft, I highlight it. So important. So important. So I don't come back and go, what did I not use? Okay, so you can see that we talk about this advertising so many times because it's literally all we have to deal with is the poster. Okay, so now we come down and talking about these, sometimes when, again, you know, I'm a reader loyalist. I want my reader to be so interested in this topic that they are inspired to keep reading. This is why I find qualitative research so effective in essay writing, because and people do it all the time. Of course they do. They publish article after article after article with no images or graphs or anything, just very dry language. And maybe the reader that they are writing for would enjoy that kind of dry language. I don't think there's a lot of wit in articles that are written for cancer research. I don't think that they're looking for something quick and witty about that. But this is sort of social psychology is what we're talking about here. This is how people behave in social groups. And this is the atmosphere in which they are creating a group. So instead of just listing the assassinations, I made a little graph. And I thought it was a really effective one. Actually, I got the graph. I didn't make it, but I found this graph, which I think the color purple is very pleasant to the eye. It keeps up with our color scheme, as you can see with these images. I wanted to use that as my title image, and I couldn't find anybody to give me permission, and it's a collage, so somebody made it, and I couldn't get permission, so I can't use it. Okay, but back to here. So that's why some of these things are in here. We'll see when we go in the actual rough draft some of that. I just want to take you through the outline. Okay, so then we come down and back to that little theory document that I had written. After I found this research, and I did this in 2 days, after I found this, somehow everything started to come together. And I had the 3 sections ready to go, and I just got inspired, and I sat down and wrote the whole theory. And it happens that way for a lot of people, because there's that point in the writing of the essay that is, what am I doing? I don't even know what I know. I don't even know what I don't know. None of this makes any sense. And now you add, the estimated 2 tons of mud. I don't know how to make any sense out of this. And then I start in my theory, and I find these gems, and not all of them are gems. You'll see when we look at the works cited. A lot of stuff I went through that I opened and I had to cite therefore didn't get used at all. So you can see I'm just using a couple of 3 really key things, and it took a while to get there. So that's what happened in the whole theory. Okay, so that's how that happened. I'm not sure that picture is in there, so I'll have to look. Okay. And remember, the last time we talked, I thought about making that the title image, and then I thought, no, it needs to be to make the point at the end. Okay, so now we're just going to spend a little bit of time on the rough draft and editing the rough draft, and that's going to be it. So stay with me, hang in there, put this on pause, go get yourself a little cup of coffee, and come back. I'll go do the same thing, and we'll meet back here in a minute or two, and we'll pick up the rough draft and go over some tips and tricks for editing. I did the abstract a long time ago. Sometimes it overwhelms students thinking an abstract, it's the easiest thing in the world to write. So I went ahead and wrote it because it was easy. Remember, this is the formula for the abstract: the motivation, the topic, short statement, the methods that I used, the actual results, what did your analysis reveal, 1 or 2 sentences, conclusion and implications, and that should all be about 150 words, and there you go. So I'm going to leave this here a second. You can come back and pause on this if you want to, and read mine over as you prepare yours. It's only 1 paragraph. It never changes. Double-spaced, indented, Times New Roman 12 font, and that's it. So the abstract did a long time ago. But let's go ahead and just add the abstract to the rough draft. Okay, I'll be right over. Here's the rough draft, and I'm going to put it right here before the introduction. Now, I don't know what all I'm going to change, but this isn't good. So I'm either going to have to make this shorter down the page. Again, I never want my reader to be confused. That's the whole point. Why is anything done? Because I always read it as though I'm a reader and I know I've heard of Woodstock, but I don't really know much about it. Okay, so that's not going to do. It's going to be confusing. Okay, so let's go into what we have. This is one of the only times where I have indented, single-spaced lyrics. And I think I like them there, but I'm not sure. Because you can see some of this stuff with the images has messed up things. I added the abstract. It messed up all this. It's going to get messed up again when I do my, continue my changes. And then I'm going to come back before the final draft. I'm going to make sure everything looks all pretty on the stage. I had an idea that all the images were going to be 2 inches. So I want the images to kind of look similar. I don't like where that one's sitting in the thing, but okay. So we're just going to look through. I think he just looks so angelic there. That's Sly and the Family Stone, a big showstopper. Happened at 2 o'clock in the morning. It just with rain coming down, and he is just rejoicing in the rain, and it was quite a, just as people were getting antsy, this would happen. Things like this would happen. There's my thesis statement. As you can see, because this is a longer essay, my introduction became 3 paragraphs. 1, 2, and 3. Each paragraph had a topic sentence, and then the 3rd paragraph contains the thesis statement. I'll look at that in just a second. Okay, now we go on. That's the thesis statement, sorry. Okay. Right now I'm just looking for the format to make sure that my 2s, 3s, and 4s, and 5s, and then we're going to do a single view and start editing, and I'm not going to have you there for the whole time that I edit everything. See how you can just move those images around? And then what's lovely is when you get all through and you save it as that PDF, and there's that wonderful feeling of, oh, thank goodness when it's saved as a PDF and everything is locked into place. Because if I save it as a Word document or on any of those Mac pages or something, oh my gosh, what it does to images is just incredible. Okay. This is all the power of context, which is a big part of how that happened. And now we're going to get down into the next section, which is the law of the few. But let me hold on just 1 second. So we just left the power of context, and that's where our wow factor graph is. And next is the law of the few. And the law of the few includes the mavens. And there they all are. How many pictures of the mavens? And then we have the connectors. Lots of pictures of the connectors. And I go by the definition that he has of here's what a connector is, and then I prove that. Now, in this section, it's possible that I overproved it. It's possible that I overproved it. So this may need some editing. So I make a little note to myself. Page 16 is going to need a little bit of page 16 to 18. It's going to need some thought. Now keep in mind too, put a pin in this a second. If I was using this structure, the essay would be half that size because it's much simpler. We simply have what happened, when it happened, why did it happen, and what was the consequence of it happening. And then we just have 3 different sections of the formula. So we're just going to be talking about, if we're talking about Hitler, we're not going to talk about all Hitler and all the people under Hitler. That would be a book, and that has been a book, I think. We want to talk about the people who were his hitmen, the ones who put people into ditches and shot them and laughed about it. You know, you got to be real specific, but that essay is going to be much shorter than the one that we're doing. So let's get back to our essay right now, the rough draft. Okay, so I may take out some of the content about these. These are the 2 guys that were in charge of the financing that made it actually happen. You know, you can have a dream all day long, and that sounds real pretty, but unless you got somebody that's writing checks, you got a problem. So that's who these were, the connectors who connected the whole dream to the actual earth money, that it takes to do things like that. So I think I may have just, overdone this a little bit. Fine, I can take it out. Okay, next we go into the connectors. There's quite a few connectors. You can't just say this was all the vision of Michael Lang. It's not. It just takes a lot of people who know absolutely no idea what they're doing, who suddenly find the inspiration to know exactly what they need to know when they need to know it. This is the section that I think is important, which is the security team of Woodstock. And I show the security team of Altamont, which is the festival I was telling you about, where 3 people were murdered, multiple stabbings, gunshots, a lot of people shot with guns, police beating up people, and they weren't police, they were the Hells Angels, which, whatever. But this is the selection of people chosen to act as security at Woodstock. And that is critical to the essay. So this may be overwritten just a little bit, but I think it's important. And then next is that's the end of the Mavens. And on to the stickiness factor. Now I want to show you something real quick though because I'm not going to take you through page by page by page of this and make you go through me editing it. That's just that's just wrong. But I am going to show you one thing. The thing I want to show you is the detail of the connectors. Now the connectors, he normally says, are people who are like they're in the business and they know who to get you in contact with, and they have a huge Rolodex, and they can get to anybody anytime and get a message to them, get help. They can make grandfather calls for you, that kind of stuff. So in the absence of that, we had these people who had to control a crowd of 600,000 people, all dirty and muddy and hungry and sick and at various stages of being loaded or not being loaded or whatever. Now, in the middle of all that, because I'm making the point that these 2 stage announcers, John Morris, Chipmunk, that they are responsible in great part for the peacefulness. And I've already shown that this is what a crowd looks like when it's under control. This is what a crowd looks like when it's under control. This is the murder of the girl at Altamont. And this is the Altamont crowd rushing the stage. And this is Woodstock people having fun in the middle of a rainstorm. That is incredible. So, during all that, here come U.S. helicopters. And this was not a period of time when people were happy. This is the sort of the counterculture people who were protesting war, protesting, all kinds of atrocities. And here come helicopters, Army helicopters. Now you can imagine, you're sitting on the ground in the mud, right next to somebody, crowded in there together with somebody else, and it's between acts, and you're hungry and you're thirsty, and all of a sudden you hear the helicopters, which you've been hearing all the time, because there was no way to get the performers to the festival, so they had to at the last minute hire helicopter companies to get them into the festival to play at the festival. So this is what John Morris says to the crowd when the helicopters come over and they look up and see the helicopters. And then what's incredible to me, if you watch the movie, they look up and see the helicopters and then they immediately look to the stage. Instead of getting up and running out in a panic, they look at the stage to see what they're supposed to do. And John Morris takes the microphone, and if you watch the movie, pay attention to this. It's incredible voice. He says, the U.S. Army have sent help. There are 45 doctors who are here without pay because they dig what this is into. They are 45 doctors without pay. They are for us. That's all he said. And the crowd cheered for the Army. I hate to put too fine a point on it, but that's 32 words that calmed 600,000 people. I don't know. That sounds like a connector to me. So you see, I'm kind of playing with Malcolm Gladwell's terminology, which I love to do. And this whole idea of Western esoteric spirituality, I put that together myself. You can do that. You can take different theories and combine them and have a lot of fun, as long as you can prove where it kind of came from. And then we get into the whole security thing and what this little security team did. The hardest thing in the whole essay is finding out who this guy is. Oh my gosh. And the answer was so easy, but it took me so long to find him. But I finally did find him, and there was a lot even more interesting stuff about him as I found him. And then we're going to get down into the stickiness factor. What made it stick? What made it stick in people's heads so that they came? What made it stick all these years later? Why have they tried repeatedly to get back to that place, to get back to that feeling? So again, we have to bring up the poster. It's all they had was the poster. So this is what the other posters of the time look like. And then this is the original Woodstock poster. And this is the poster that was used. And you can see that they put the mission statement right there on the poster. 3 days of peace and music. That's a mission statement. And so then we go through here, and I use this little graph, very simple graph. I don't use anything complicated, but this simply shows the power of purpose in a very simple, uncomplicated diagram. It gives the reader something to see that's a diagram that does not require them to read much or to see much, and I comment a little bit about that diagram and what that means. And then we're going to come down to the theory of Western esoteric spirituality, which breaks down into mystical insight and intuition. And again with the poster, I know you're probably saying, oh my gosh, could we have gotten any more use out of this poster? No, we couldn't, because it's all they had. And it was inspired by Matisse. And Matisse is a guy who faced every challenge you can think in the world, every challenge. He couldn't move his hands. He's an artist, can't move his hands. So he did paper cutouts. And he couldn't go even to the swimming pool. And so he said at one point, I'll make my own swimming pool. And he did that in a huge mural with paper cutouts. So, yeah, we're going to use it a lot. It's all we have. If I had other things, I'd use other things. If I was doing the March for Our Lives, I might talk about how they communicated with each other if I could ever even figure it out. Okay, so there we have that. And then, I agree, maybe it's overproved. Maybe it's overproved. I'll make a note. That's page 30. I'll make a note because it may be overproved. And if it is, I can cut it down. That's why I edit. Okay, and then we come down to this moment. This is like the big key point of the whole thing, of the whole spirituality of the thing. And that's the Porta Sandman. You probably, if you've seen the movie, it's this darling man who is cleaning up the porta potties. And it's kind of a cool thing, I think. I didn't come up with it by myself. And it's quoted all the way through here that I didn't come up with that by myself. But it is the key central thing that the filmmakers thought was the whole essence of Woodstock. And that's why it's in at the end of the film, blah, blah. So, kept it there. Then we have our conclusion. And this is comparing Woodstock. I made this all by myself. Comparing Woodstock to the Vietnam War. This is them cleaning up after that horrible My Lai massacre. And this is them cleaning up after Woodstock. And this is like the ruins of the Woodstock thing. And this is the ruin of that. And then I have my afterword, which is my note. And of course it's all messed up because it's just all just all over the place. Okay, so this is the end, the conclusion, which is one paragraph. And then the afterword, which is this. That looks dark, doesn't it? Look at that. And with all these other pictures. These are way too dark. Well, that one I want to keep dark because they're talking in the middle of the thunderstorm with this enthusiasm and happiness and rejoicing. I would just be going, what is happening right now? But, so I wanted to keep that a little bit dark. This one shouldn't be that dark. So up here in my, limited stuff here, I could Photoshop it, but just to show you for right now, I can do like this and look for that'll do for right now. But you can just see, you can change a picture that way. I'm not sure I like it, but let's go back and now we're going to take a little break. I want you to take a little break. I want you to put this on pause and go to take a little walk and then come back. And we're going to spend 15 minutes. I promise I'm going to set my timer and we're going to go 15 minutes over the editing portion of this thing. And I promise I'll set my timer on 15 minutes. Okay, I'll see you back in 2 minutes. Okay, Google. Set timer for 15 minutes. All right, here we go. All right, this is the abstract. I've already proofed it, but okay. This is going to have to come down. Okay, I don't want my reader to have to ever have to think about a thing. I want them to know everything. And I just do simple page numbers. I don't like my name on there. It confuses my reader. They're not reading Hall, they're reading the page. So that's my thing. Again, I'm there for my reader. Okay. Now here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to go through this and then I'm going to show you a couple of pointers in the essay and then that'll be it because I only have 15 minutes. Okay, so like my Power of Our Friends, comma, I wanted 1969 to be the year where I was heard, where I could make a difference. Considering the signs of the times, the idea of being part of the counterculture movement, of change, it's not hyphenated, of change seemed remote. Young people sought camaraderie during a time when post-WW2 adults could not understand anything beyond the acceptable political norms. I know that in my family, assassinations and assassinations, I had put a pointless war. It was my original thing, and then I went back and changed it, and arguably, because not everybody's going to agree that it was a pointless war. Some people are going to think it had purpose. So I have to just put in my argument that it's arguably pointless. Questions about the status quo and the rights movement. It is simply not tolerated. My mother once said, we trust our politicians to tell us what's true, and don't ask, don't tell, worked for that generation. But the children of the 60s began to ask questions, and the answers were given in the threats of violence and army drafts. By the mid-60s, war was raging. Assassinations were the order of the day. Teenagers were paralyzed in fear, and from that fear rose a counterculture. And now I put this whole lyric in there. It's really important not to do this very often. It makes my reader stop and have to refocus and look at a single spaced thing. So I don't want to put in very much, and I don't do it very often. But this is important. Come on, mothers throughout the land, pack your boys off to Vietnam. Come on, fathers, and don't hesitate to send your sons off before it's too late. You can be the first ones on your block to have your boy come home in a box. Okay. I think that's important. In 1967, a new craze swept the nation. Teens mourned the end of the Beatles and ushered in a new era of outdoor folk rock festivals. And now this is an example of a topic sentence. I went ahead and bolded and highlighted this for you because some people have a problem with topic sentences, with thesis sentences, and I want to make sure I demystify that for you. And it helps me when I'm editing, and sometimes I do that, and I may when I get through with this and I do my actual editing where I'm going to do every single page. Sometimes I'll do that for myself to make sure. Every sentence in this paragraph had better have something to do with popular festivals. That's what the topic sentence says. Hundreds of thousands of students flock to open-air venues, listen to the power of music, and find fellowship. Yes, that's about the festivals. There was an insistent need to connect, to rise above the fray of wars and assassinations and chaos and become one with the same power that could console. Okay, literally, I just talked about that. I don't need that sentence. Now, when I take out a sentence, I don't throw it away. I take it over and put it into another Word document just in case, that I call rough draft leftovers. The estimated total count of those at the festival camped around the town of Bethel and trapped in endless traffic jams exceeded 4 million hippies of all ages who came from the far corners of the earth to be part of this spectacle. All right, that's still about festivals. Woodstock was in many ways a grand and expensive catastrophe. What's this? A young man at the Woodstock concert observed, quote, "They think that if they come," see this, when I did this, it didn't go with black ink. There we go. That fixed it. They think that if they come here, they can find out what it is or how to maintain with it. People are very lost, I think. And this is from the Wadley film. And I could not find that young man's name, no matter what I did to save my soul. For many lost souls, a leader is needed to guide them to the promised land. That's my transition sentence. And my transition sentence means that the next paragraph is going to be about what? Some kind of a leader that is going to take them out of this quagmire. Good. That's good. Moving on. This essay postulates a potential theory. Again, it's, you know, we're going to not etch it in stone and put a plaque for it, but that attempts to explain the earth and spiritual elements that combine to create a sociological event. As Dale Bell, producer of Woodstock, said, we had an urgency to capture the anthropology of it in addition to the music. The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. Now, this is the part of the introduction where I'm telling you more about the sources that I'm using because it's his whole thing. This is his formula. Is a book about how small actions at the right time, in the right place, and with the right people can create a tipping point for anything from a product to an idea to a trend. Okay, still something about the theory. Yes, that's his theory. To understand, now this is my big thesis statement. To understand the power of Woodstock, a study of the tipping point criteria of power of context, law of the few, connectors, and the stickiness factor, combine with the laws of Western esoteric, to form a theory of the unexpected cataclysmic success of the most influential socio-cultural event of the 20th century, a symphony of mystical intuition, Western esoteric principles, and spirituality. Right? What's this essay about? Woodstock. Power. A theory postulated by some guy who wrote The Tipping Point. That organization is going to be the power of context, the law of the few, connectors, and the stickiness factor. And that's only going to take us so far when we look at the spike, as we talked about before, and that's going to combine with the laws of Western esoteric philosophy to form a theory of the unexpected cataclysmic success of the most influential socio-cultural event of the 20th century, a symphony of mystical intuition, Western esoteric principles, and spirituality. A thesis sentence tells the reader what they're going to see and what they're going to see next, what they're going to see next and next and next. Right? And this is from that wonderful article that I showed you, and I have his quotes peppered all the way through. And because I referenced so much about Gladwell up here, let's talk about where that spirituality is going to come from. Edward England Watkin, one of the pioneers of the Western esoteric movement. Now we have esoteric with a capital E. I have to make a decision. If one of them is capitalized with an E, they all have to be capitalized with an E. But that's easy to do. Let's do it. Let's do it. Just replace esoteric with esoteric. Spelled right. Replace all. Okay. Done. All right. Now, let's see. Where are we? Let's go back down here. Okay. An understanding. And now we have a thesis. We have a transition statement. An understanding of the elements that combine to create a bonanza of this magnitude requires an analysis of the sign of the times, the dream, and the masterful marketing strategy. So instead of repeating over and over again the law of the few, the connectors and stuff, I put it in a different language. Sign of the times, the dream, and a masterful marketing strategy. Okay. Wait a minute. Did I put the stickiness factor in there? The dream. Okay, let me fix this. I'll be right back. Okay, and a link to immortality. That's that fourth section, the stickiness factor. Here we have the power of context. Okay, and this is that thesis, the topic statement, the environment or historical movement in which the trend is introduced, and this is from the tipping point, so that's what this is going to be about. Festival crowd size began to escalate. Larger venues were booked for festivals. That better be what everything in here is about. Okay, you can see that. This is the power of context. I like this picture because it shows where they were, and you can just kind of see the whole vision with that image. Okay, and then everything's quoted here. I want to show you a couple of other things because I only have a few more minutes, so let me just hold on. I'll be right back. I hate it when I read things that just continually give me this place was 1 mile by 2 miles. I have no context to see that. Right? If they tell me that a blue whale is however many feet long, I have no context for that. Somebody says $3 trillion. All I hear is the 3. I have no concept or framework to fill in that blank. I don't ever want my reader to have to fill in the blank for anything. So, this is an important point, and when I go back and do the rough draft, I may find that this is a little overwritten, but this is important. Since the United States never declared war on North Vietnam, the president was free to enlist a peacetime draft of young men. The Pentagon defended the draft since very few 18-year-olds would have entered the service if not for the draft as a motivator. Let's see, I'll do this if we can just get there. Well, no, it's not going to work. Johnson claimed that he had no choice but to draft 35,000 teenagers per month to protect South Vietnam from communism. And the point of that is that over 125,000 troops to a country half the size of Texas. Isn't that better than the how many miles it was and so forth? I just wanted to show you that. Sometimes for the reader, it's nice to contextualize. I had to find that. I went to Google and I typed in how large was Vietnam, and it showed me. And then I say, what state is this size? And then it came back with the size of Texas, and it's half. It's from that source. And that takes a couple of seconds, but it sure does help the reader to have a context. Okay, next point. It would have been very easy to show an image of Vietnam that was really disturbing and horrible. My essay is about people banding together. It is about people coming together for a common cause to have a different life. This is the picture that I chose because this is not the focus of the essay, and I don't want my reader to be stopped from reading other than to pause and say, oh, I get it. Those people are trying to come together as well. And remember, we want to use a variety of ways of presenting information to a reader. Don't you like to see that? Sometimes I want to see a percentage. Sometimes I want to see a graph. Sometimes I want to see a pretty picture. But just different ways of presenting information so that you don't tire the reader. Again, if I'm writing a scientific essay about cures for cancer, other than images that would support techniques or procedures, I don't need to include a picture of a pretty person smiling. This is a technical essay. Our essay here is a sociological essay. So my reader is interested in the sociology of it, the anthropology of it. All right. So let me move on to, this is the big point of all of that, and that is this My Lai massacre. And that was just the tip of the iceberg, because everything else had been redacted and hidden, so nobody knew what was really going on, which is maddening in and of itself. But this massacre happened on March 16th, and on March 18th, it was leaked. The festival's in August. So, there you go. All right, then this is, I put this in here because, again, to break up information. I could have listed the assassinations, but showing how close they were in proximity to the festival. This is April of 68, right? So I think that was, and it's a really good image. Then I put in this image because we're talking about a musical festival. And I don't want to get off into the land of where we're talking about a political festival. This, as it turns out, which I kind of had forgotten a little bit, this was a huge thing in the music world, in the sociological world, in society. In 64, the Beatles came to America and started an entire industry of one English band after another. That was, and that was only 5 years. It seems like forever. It seems like the Beatles were here forever. And then they did their final concert, and that was on January the 30th. And there was sort of a mourning for, you know, what are we going to do now? I remember, now we're done, I remember sitting with my friends wondering what was happening, what's going to happen next. Okay, so then the Apollo space mission, I did not include an image of the Apollo space mission. I could, because it was sort of like, take me out of this world. And I am so tired of this world that I would be more than happy to go on a spacecraft. And I added it in the same paragraph with, just 2 weeks later, the Manson family had murdered Sharon Tate and her friends. And that was on August 8th and 9th. This festival is the next week. And I just wonder, I don't know, that's why I say I wonder. It's okay to wonder in an essay. We don't have to have all the answers. We can pose the questions. And so I said, I wonder if that was the last straw for young people on the West Coast. And after having set up this world of the story, I'm going to go on to transition to the Woodstock Festival. Meanwhile, while everybody's having reasons to head that way, Michael Lang and his merry band of misfits were trying to figure out where the kids are. And I've got to find the quote where he says that. It won't be hard to find. I have it in my notes because it's the only time he said kids. So I need to document that, because otherwise the reader would say, how do you know that's what he said? Okay, ask the teenagers you can find in the most nerdy kid from Oklahoma. Okay, and then I bring it back to me. I, a nerdy kid in Oklahoma, knew about the concert by June of 1969, and I do not know how. And then I go through the ARPANET stuff and the computer things, and again, the first thing with the poster, but that was only put in the newspaper the week of the festival. And the rest of it was flyers being handed out by, I don't know how to explain all that. Then we're still in context, so we're contexting. And that's where I put the graph. Do you like it there? It's on page 10, third of the way through the essay. Do you like it there? Man, I don't want the reader to have to go back too far to find it, but I don't want to repeat it. I suppose I could do it in a different way, but that's time consuming and annoying because it would just be restating. Now then we go through the Mavens, and I'm going to go ahead and videotape myself when I actually edit all this information. And you may have a choice to watch those or not as I go through this paragraph by paragraph. But for the purposes of this and the little quiz you're going to be taking after all these tutorials, I want to just cover the essentials because I'm running out of time. I've got 3 minutes left. I really like the end of this whole section on the mavens, the announcers the connectors, making them the connectors. I thought that was good. I added up those words myself, and I drew that conclusion all by myself. I like it. And I have it all documented there in the documentary where it happens and everything. I liked it. And then here we come with that whole thing about the security detail. And we had a nice transition into that right here, the security team. The sentence before, at the end of the paragraph, is a transition to the next sentence. So that's what a transition sentence is, and you already know that. Okay, so now the stickiness factor is the last of the factors, and I highlighted and underlined one particular thing for you to see, because this lets you see what I'm going to be talking about with the stickiness factor. And because my reader has been reading lots of information and I don't want them oversaturated, I write, with regards to the stickiness factor, 2 aspects of the festival are revisited. A deeper understanding of the 2 methods Lang & Company could access to get the word out for the festival, the poster flyers and news ads and radio advertising, and the ensured legacy of the festival in Michael Wadley's film Woodstock. So that tells the reader that there are only 2 sections to the stickiness factor. 1, how they got the word out, and that somehow that happened, and 2, Michael Wadley's film Woodstock. All right, so we talk about the poster again. We're going to talk about the poster one more time because it's all we've got. Okay, so this was about that. Now hold on, I want to spend my last time looking at this. Wait. Do you see how the last paragraph of a section sets up the structure for the next section to come? Mystical, deeper eye, spiritual element. Right? So here's the mystical intuition. And now the next thing that the reader knows is they're going to see the deeper eye. And they know that the next thing they're going to see is the spiritual element. See that in that transition sentence? I can't stress that enough, and I think you all are getting that. This is really fun, this little connect-a-dot thing. But then there's one thing I want to go over with you, and I just have 1 minute, 35 seconds to do it. So, hold on. I had the conclusion built all the way through the essay because I added information as I went through. So I just want you to read with me through the conclusion and the afterword, because I felt like I couldn't say everything that I had to say in just a conclusion, because we have to wrap it around to that dedication. As the Portosan man finished his job, the crew asked him about his perceptions of Woodstock. My son's here, and I got one over in Vietnam, too, McLuhan. Another simple statement of unconditional love for children of war and children of protest. McLuhan bridges the counterculture concert to the Vietnam War. Choppers buzz overhead, but bring rock musicians instead of Marines. Thousands wander a wasteland looking blasted and dazed. There's a strange collision of advanced technology and mud. We see lots of destruction and shit and no one quite knowing what to do with it. But among the chaos, there are moments of love. The aftermath is a sign of the times, an exploration of the deeper I, a connection to the mystical, intuitive spirit beyond the comprehension of the natural order and into the realm of the spirit where even acts of unfortunate nature contain peace and chords of choirs. Afterward. Over a decade, much has been made of the counterculture revolution, of sit-ins and summers of love. As I researched this essay, all nostalgic reports claim that nothing like Woodstock 1969 could ever happen again. Festival promoters went on to create subsequent festivals, Woodstock 1989, 2009, and proposed and canceled for 2019. Was the hope to get back the spirit of the original, to bring back the back in the day to the present? I was talking to some of my baby boomer peers who started the sentence with kids today. Why, in my day, I stopped them right there. With no rule unbroken, no excess mitigated, I hardly think anyone can hold up my generation as a repository of a sound and sober moral compass. Today's young generation are worldwide beyond the scope of anything I have or will ever know. I'm blessed to work with people of all ages, from Generation X to Xennials, Millennials, Generation Y, Generation Next, iGen, Gen Z, and Gen Alpha. Each generation stands on the shoulders of their elders, and each generation wants desperately to be heard, to be understood, and to matter. In the day of Woodstock, people formed a mass exodus to a remote location in upstate New York, in principal part to find something, a peaceful haven, a sacred land and promise. And yet, were those fans not emblematic of a larger quest to be liked? Granted, it took far more than the click of a mouse to mount a campaign for popularity, but the ultimate goal was the same. With a fundamental lack of synthesizers and voice stabilization apps, the music that rose above the fray of the 60s was unique. Jimi Hendrix will always be remembered, at least to a few of us, as the painful voice of the American flag that raised from the dead ashes of Fort McHenry's Battle of 1814 and gave proof through the night that our flag was still there, Star Spangled Banner. And so to the children of the world and their children at times, I stand, and their children, oh, that's a mess. And so to the children of the world and their children, I stand with you as one voice who understands and does, I believe, I believe, all of humanity, to stand up to evil and tyranny, and never stop truth until truth is told and change is. I offer this eternal hope that all citizens in the world will never stop seeking the truth that is told in the pure sounds of silence. Their lives. I saw eternity the other night like a great ring of pure and endless light, all calm as it was bright, and round beneath it, time and hours, days, years, driven by the spheres, like a vast shadow moved. Not sure I like that, but okay. All right. So that's, to me, a better ending, because it makes it important. It's the fact that Woodstock could never happen again, maybe, I don't know, but something more important is happening right now. I don't remember ever doing live shooter drills when I was in school, and so that's it. There's my timer. You all, thank you for being patient and going through all this with me. If you are interested and you would like to carry on and see what I'm doing in the rest of the edit, feel free to watch those tutorials. Otherwise, this is the one that's required. This is the one that'll be included on the test, and that concludes this tutorial.